Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. As usual, it's great to have you with us. The wars over health care are heating up between a democratically controlled California and Trump's right-wing Republican power in the executive branch. California is passing a new law, Assembly Bill number 4, and it would use state and federal funds, so undocumented adults 19 to 25 would be eligible for Medicaid, giving them access to health care benefits. It also gives families at 6 times the poverty level, that's $150,000 a year, $100 a month to pay for benefits. Opponents say it's unfair to tax citizens to pay for undocumented people's benefits, or as the opponents would say, not undocumented, you're illegal. So this new health care thrust in California clearly deepens the divide, not only between California and the Trump White House, but on the debates over Obamacare and health care for all, and may have an effect on the 2020 election. And we're joined by Michael Leighty, longtime healthcare activist and Sanders Institute fellow. And Michael, welcome back to the Real News. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be back.
So let's talk about that. So talk about the debate that took place inside of the House in California, because I understand that there were other people who wanted a larger bill to cover everybody. There was actually a real debate over this. The governor really was pushing it as well. So talk a bit about, very quickly, the politics of what was taking place inside.
Well, this has been an effort, Mark, for a number of years to cover undocumented folks in California, because I think, like most advocates, certainly when I worked for the nurses, it was very clear that viruses know no border, that even like you see in the vaccine issue of measles, immigration status doesn't matter. And so there's just been recognition among progressive policymakers that we really do need to guarantee health care for all. So there was an effort to cover everybody a number of years ago. It evolved into first covering undocumented kids under 18, and then provided for non-subsidy access to the exchange formed under the Affordable Care Act for adults who are undocumented. And now this latest iteration is to cover undocumented folks under 26. But the real intent was to cover every undocumented person in California who is eligible for Medi-Cal.
But that didn't happen, right?
That did not happen. There are 2.5 million undocumented folks in California. Half would be eligible if they just followed the regular Medi-Cal criteria. Instead, under 100,000 undocumented folks will be eligible for this program.
And part of that had to do with money. I mean, this is costing $98 million as opposed to covering everyone, which would be $3.4 billion, which the opponent said was just too much. You can't do it. Am I right about that?
You're right, because politically, that's a very heavy lift. If you're going to cover every undocumented worker, you should cover every Californian, period, regardless of immigration status. That's our position as Medicare for All supporters. That's what we did with SB 562. And we always said that, yes, you can establish the principle to cover undocumented folks, but if you're actually going to do it politically and effectively as policy, put everyone in one program and guarantee health care for all.
So before we jump into what this might mean on a larger national scale, I want to play this clip from Fox News where the kind of conservative pushback against this idea, so we can talk about this for a moment. Here it comes.
Well now, full healthcare benefits for illegals in California.
It's about 90,000 low-income illegal immigrants will be eligible for this. They're saying it's going to cost about $100 million, as you said. I can't see how that seems very low in terms of what the cost could potentially be.
But it's just for just 90,000 illegals. It's not all illegal.
That's what they're estimating right now, because there is an income level threshold. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's an income level. But 90,000, they think it'll cost $100 million a year. Wow. Dream on. I don't see that.
So, and that was Stuart Varney, who benefited from the healthcare system in England growing up, I'm sure. But anyway, that argument, plus the argument that it's unfair for citizens to pay for non-citizens' health care. So these are going to be some serious issues in the battle around health care and what California has done in terms of a national struggle.
But look at that Fox clip, Mark. What was in the background? Was it scenes of the uninsured? Was it scenes of of the public health crisis at the border, where kids are being denied health care, among other basic necessities. No, it was a screenshot of the stock price of key healthcare industry corporations, insurance companies, and others.
Yes.
That's the lens through which the healthcare system is viewed by Fox and so many people in this country. It's an industry. What we're saying on principle is it's a caregiving profession, and that we need to guarantee healthcare for all with no barriers to care and no borders. So politically, we are in this fight, and we have an alternative vision. The question of pay for is real. It's much more cost effective to pay for universal health care for all through single payer than it is to do this. And the issue, I think, politically is if you're going to tax individuals and then not really guarantee health care to them, you're going to create a political fallout, whether it's immigrants or any other issue. It has to be universal. It has to be guaranteed for it to actually work politically. But on the other hand, as Larry Levitt from the Kaiser Family Foundation said, this is hugely important symbolically. It's a hugely important affirmative fight, taking on the administrator's assumption that somehow if we deny folks who work in our restaurants, who clean our buildings, if we deny them health care, we're going to be healthier. It's an absurd position. We rely upon these people all the time. When we go to restaurants, we pay for them. They're just not getting health care. They pay into Social Security. We've seen studies in California, nearly 80% of the undocumented folks are working. They're paying taxes, they're not getting health care, and they're discriminated against by employers who are taking advantage of their immigration status. So combine that whole set of social issues, you see fundamentally that if we believe health care is a right, it is not and cannot be based on immigration status. And that's a political fight we're going to have to win federally if we're ever going to establish guaranteed health care, because otherwise the right will use that as a reason to deny it to everybody.
Well, let's talk about that fight that will be brewing because of this, and in the long term in the 2020 election around the question of immigration and health care. And we talked earlier before we went on camera about abortion and health care is another one. We won't dive into that one too deeply today. But let me show you this map. This is the map that our visual producer, Andrew Corkery, found that I want to share with you and with our viewers, that shows the states that actually cover health care for immigrants. And you can look at this map and see that you've got, some states like California, Oregon, Washington, New York, Illinois cover adults and children, and some states pregnant women only, like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, southern states, Minnesota, Nebraska. And then you have children only in a couple of states, but the vast majority of states, no matter whether they are blue or red states, don't cover immigrants at all, undocumented immigrants at all. So this is a very tense, touchy, and battle that really draws lines. It doesn't even often go into what's fact. It has to do more with emotions about who people are coming across the border, what they should get, and what we should be paying for as citizens, right? So talk about what your analysis here about what this map says, about what this struggle might mean coming up in the next year for this presidential election.
It is definitely an issue that varies by state. I think it's ironic, of course, that there might be some states controlled by the GOP where immigration is not the decisive issue on healthcare, for example, Texas. And then there are, of course, other states like California, I think, where it is not a barrier to majority support for universal healthcare. Where it is a barrier to support for universal health care, we have two options. We are going to have to either win the fight over comprehensive immigration reform, or we're going to have to make the argument that through health care, we change people's attitudes toward what it means to including undocumented workers who are already part of our society in the social programs that define us. So that really is, I think, the political question that we have to face. As a matter of principle, if you believe healthcare is a human right and you believe we need to guarantee healthcare for all, you're not going to condition that right on status, whether it's gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, race, and so forth. And immigration status is one of those. Ultimately, I believe politically we have to win on the issue of converting the healthcare industry to a caregiving profession that guarantees healthcare with no barriers to care. If we don't include undocumented folks, if we don't include every resident, we don't achieve it. And then we have leakage in the system. You have ill individuals who are not getting the treatment they need, and that's going to affect everyone. I think really when I talk about this issue, Mark, with advocates, I often cite Dr. Martin Luther King, who said that we are all tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects us one directly affects all indirectly. And that couldn't be more true in healthcare. It couldn't be more true in this issue. And if we're not prepared to actually address the public health crisis that asylum seekers face at the border, that folks in our own communities face, regardless of status, then we're not going to achieve what all of us need. And that's the fundamental point. All of us have a stake in everyone around us being healthy.
So just to round this out, I mean, there are two quick issues. I'm not quick, because we could go on for days with this, but A is that this California bill does set up a huge debate. There's no way that California by itself could create Medicare for all. A state can't do it alone, given the nature of healthcare in this country. And B, when you look at what happened just now between Mexico and the United States and Trump pushing the tariff and all the other things that just happened and the complexities of that when Mexico was actually doing things even before Trump did anything, the real issue is here, this becomes a real, as I said earlier, emotional issue. So the question is how you tie them together or separate them when you're trying to create a political movement on the progressive end of the spectrum.
Well, it is significant that Representative Jayapal comes out of the immigration rights movement and is the leading advocate for Medicare for All in the House as the primary co-sponsor of the bill. So there is fundamentally a kind of understanding that these issues are linked. I tend to think when you go to places like Iowa and all of a sudden you realize that the hog farms are staffed overwhelmingly by immigrants from Mexico and Central America. When you go to Georgia and you see the expansion of Latinx communities there, obviously in Florida, these states are important swing states, pivotal states. Minnesota obviously has a large Somali population. So you really can't escape anywhere you go in the country the issue of undocumented folks being an integral part of the American workforce. And so we are in a fight, ultimately, over xenophobia, over structural racism, over injustice that is rooted both in race and immigration status. And they directly impact healthcare. If we take the principle, guarantee healthcare with no barriers to care, everybody in, nobody out, then I believe the politics of resentment, which drive the dynamic you're talking about, they're getting it, but I'm not. And that's true for white working class folks, and it's true for a lot of other folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That resentment dynamic, right, goes away if everybody's situation improves. If everybody has guaranteed health care, why are you going to resent someone else having it?
Michael Eddy, we're just touching the surface here. We've got a little bit more than the surface, I mean, we have so much more to talk about with this. And I appreciate the work you do and you joining us here in The Real News. And thank you so much for your time today. We'll look at this some more.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Always good to talk to you. And I'm Mark Steiner here for The Real News Network. Thank you all for joining us. Take care.